Do you do presentations? Forget all the rules of thumb you've read about so far. There's only one rule of thumb worth following in order for you to be effective and get results from your presentations. I'd like to share it with you now. The first rule of thumb I'm going to talk about is not having more than 10 slides in your presentation. This actually comes from the broader rule of 10, 20, 30, with 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes, and no less than 30-point text. But I want to talk about the 10 slides issue. Now, depending on your presentation, you may actually need more than 10, or perhaps even fewer than 10. If it's a short presentation, you've got 5 or 10 minutes, or even if it's a long presentation. I watched actually a seminar delivered by a very, very effective speaker who only had about a dozen slides over the course of an hour and a half. That's because what he was doing was telling stories. It was more of a motivational kind of event, and he used those slides simply for visual impact and as a reminder for what he wanted to talk about next. And in that case, it worked effectively. At the same time, you might have a presentation where you want 20, 30, 40, 50 slides. In fact, you might use them in rapid sequence and talk about each one only very quickly. So there's really no reason to limit yourself only to 10 slides. Now, the next one is no more than 5 bullet points on each slide. Well, again, it depends, because you might only have 1 bullet point on a slide, and that's effective, but you may actually be talking about something like a process, and there's 10 steps, and you want 10 steps on 1 slide, so that the people in the audience can see them together. It might also be a training program that you're doing, and you want those steps to be listed so that your students can fill in the blanks on a form or something of that nature. So again, it simply depends exactly on what you're doing and why you're giving the presentation and what the expectation and the outcome is going to be. So don't worry so much about the 5 bullet points on each slide. Really what the idea behind it is, don't clutter your slides and try not to have too much information or more information than you need. So the next point, which is very similar, is no more than 6 words for each bullet point. To a certain extent, I can understand this because I have seen bullet points that were literally paragraphs, and the person talking to the slide literally read them out loud. So you want them short, but 6, 7, 8, or 3 doesn't matter nearly as much as the context. You might even not bother using bullet points and simply put words in the middle of your screen. And you might have 10 words because you're talking about something and it takes 10 words to talk about it. Now the key thing here is not to read your slides. The slides and the bullets you put are not for reading. They are for the audience to see them as you discuss. Perhaps even, as I mentioned, for training, you might want them to be writing it down in their notebook. So the next one is 2 to 3 minutes per slide. Again, it depends. If you've got a large number of slides, like say 60 in an hour and a half presentation, then you won't spend 2.5 minutes or 2 to 3 minutes on each slide. But like the example I gave before, where an hour and a half presentation had about a dozen slides, clearly he's spending more than 2 to 3 minutes per slide. The point here isn't the length of time on a slide. The point here is making sure you get the right amount of time mixed with the right amount of slides so that you're holding your attention of your audience and you're conveying your message. You might speak 1 minute or even 30 seconds about one slide, and a little later on you speak 5 or maybe 10 minutes about another slide. Don't even bother using the 2 to 3 minutes per slide to judge how long it's going to take for you to deliver a presentation. You really have to run through that presentation and talk about everything yourself before you'll know exactly how long it will take. So those are a few of the rules of thumb that you might commonly see, and you really want to reconsider whether you're going to use them as is. So now let's talk about the only rule of thumb that you really need to know. So you're developing your PowerPoint presentation slides for a reason. So really the ultimate rule is to design your presentation to achieve your objectives. It may be to teach, it may be to inform, it may be to influence, it may be to a large audience, a small audience, it may be a short presentation, it may be a long presentation. The key is that you need to develop the slides to meet those specific reasons. And each of those rules of thumb don't really enable you much flexibility. So the principles from the rules that I just talked about should be used, but they shouldn't box you in. feel free to break them as needed. So why is that? Because it depends, as I mentioned, on your audience, your presentation, the topic, and your objective. And you really need to consider what your objective is and focus your slides on meeting that objective rather than using these predefined rules of thumb. Now, how do you know if what you're doing is effective? Well, first, look back at the theory or the reasons for some of those rules of thumb. Second, lots of practice and pay close attention to what other presenters do and see whether or not you think that's effective. And if it is, try to emulate it. The most important thing is to understand the principles and fit them to your own purpose. And if you do that, your presentations will be more effective.